Mr. Krause, I really appreciate you doing this because this is exciting for everyone, especially for you. But I want you to take me back to the genesis of this project. Why did you want to get involved in trying to bring hockey back to Atlanta?
Well, I think there's a number of things. Number one, I love Atlanta. Lived here for many, many years. We have football, we have basketball, we have baseball, and we're one of the few cities, in fact, we're the largest city, to my knowledge, that doesn't have the NHL. I was a season ticket holder when the Thrashers were here. Mm-hmm. I've missed it since the day they left. I wish I'd known before they left that they were planning to leave so that we could have, maybe tried to keep it here.
A lot has happened since the Thrashers left. Obviously, it's been over a decade. The city has changed, the landscape has changed, and there are a lot of people that are skeptical about Atlanta having a hockey team or the Atlanta area for a third time. Why would it work this time?
Well, let me explain this. So about maybe 4 or 5 months ago, my wife and I went up to New York and met with Gary Bettman, and that was the first question he asked me. He said, why, it's failed twice, why do you think you'd be successful with it this time? And it was really an easy answer. I think that it wasn't in the right location, and I don't think it had ownership that was dedicated to the success of the team. I think the ownership team that bought it from Ted Turner was, my understanding, was very interested in basketball and had to take hockey kind of to get, they had to buy both franchises from Ted Turner, and I don't think they had passion for the sport.
It's not like this has happened overnight. You mentioned going up to New York and meeting with the commissioner, Gary Bettman. So take me up to that moment. What were the pieces in place to allow that meeting to happen?
Well, I think this started really almost 2 years ago, where I made a comment to a friend that my son was taking over the business, and I made the comment that he was working me out of a job. And he said, well, I know you, and you've still got a lot of energy. What are you going to do? And I said, well, I said that I talked to him about hockey in Atlanta, and I said, I would like to see if I could be instrumental in bringing hockey back to Atlanta. And that started, and actually, ironically, he said, would you like to meet Bobby Orr? And I said, sure. Why? Do you know him? And he said, yeah, he's a member of my golf club. So we had lunch, and from that discussion, it grew. I mean, he got me excited about the idea and introduced me, made an early introduction to Commissioner Bettman, and we talked, and it was a long shot. I mean, it was at that time, at the end of that luncheon, my son called me and said, how was lunch with Bobby Orr? And I said, it was great. He said, what do you think the odds are? And I said, probably 1 in 1,000,
Yeah.
But it grew, and I mean, it would be a long story to tell you how we got to here, but that's how it started, and here we are.
Okay, well, fast forward to 2 years later. You said 1 in 1,000 back then.
Okay.
What do you think it is now?
I think that if the NHL decides to expand, and we believe that they will, and if you've listened to Gary Bettman and the Commissioner Bettman and Deputy Commissioner Bill Daley, if you've listened to their interviews, they talk about expansion and they talk about Atlanta. Atlanta's a totally different city than it was back, especially the first time, but and the second time, and I think that our odds are very good. I think we have the property. You have to have property for this to get started, and we have a great piece of property.
Okay, let's dive into the property a little bit, because clearly you have plans in place if the NHL were to come here to build this property. When would you expect to start building?
Well, the county commissioners will be holding a vote a week from tomorrow. And assuming that we get a positive vote from the commission, which we are very hopeful that we will get, we will be in a position to move forward very rapidly with our development at that time. As far as NHL goes, we would have to wait until they made a decision, if and when they make a decision. But we want to be in the position where it would be very difficult for them to say no to Atlanta and very difficult for them to say no to our project.
Okay, so there are a lot of moving pieces and a lot of moving parts to this project, obviously.
There are.
The NHL has consistently said that there is no guarantee that they are going to expand. That is the hope. Obviously, you wouldn't be sitting here if that wasn't the hope. There's also other ownership groups that are vying to bring hockey back here to this area.
That's correct.
Why is yours the right one?
Well, number one, to my knowledge, we're the only group that owns the land. So we own the land. We don't have an option on land. We have closed on the land and own it. And I think that's real important, because that, short of, as soon as we get a decision from the county, we're ready to go. It's my understanding that, I don't know who I know who one other group is, and I think that's a decided advantage. Our location and the fact that we own the land.
You also have a lot of people on your team that have done this before. Why is that helpful to you?
Well, I mean, without them, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you today, because I have not done a project like this before. But you're right. I think early on, I was very lucky in that initial introduction that Bobby Orr made. He made an introduction to the commissioner for me, and then I met some other people who knew other people, and I got connected with Carl Hirsch and Stafford Sports, and he has done these projects all over the country. And I think, so meeting Carl, Lamar Wakefield, who did the battery for the Braves, he was the land planner for the Braves for Avalon. And then he introduced Carl introduced me to Frank, who did a project with Arizona State, he did the arena there for the Phoenix Coyotes. So, and here we are.
And here we are. One thing that I think a lot of people never really get to see, the people like you that are involved in these projects, they don't know their level of passion for the sport that they're going after. So why do you love hockey?
Well, I think it's the most exciting sport that I've ever watched. And I didn't grow up with hockey. I grew up with baseball, basketball, and football. And but when the Atlanta Knights came here and we started going to those games, and then the Thrashers, and became a season ticket holder, and I'd take my sons down to those games, and we looked forward to every game. I mean, we loved it. We were very sorry to see them leave.
When you get a sense of the public and their opinion on this and bringing hockey back to this area, what is the overwhelming sense that you get from them? What is the feedback that the public is telling you?
Well, since word got out, and when we started on this project, we wanted to keep it extremely quiet for a number of reasons. But it finally got out there, and the response has just been overwhelming. I mean, it just, the number of calls from people, and is this really true? And ex-NHL players that would contact us, and then recently we did a poll of Forsyth County voters that showed 81% were on the low end, moderately extremely excited about having the opportunity for NHL to come to Forsyth County. 55% said they were extremely, and another 8% said very, so 63%. I mean, that's amazing, you know?
It's half the battle, is you need people to want it back, right?
Yes, yes. And I think the idea of it being with a development that had restaurants, hotels, retail, office space, living, work environment, and then to have an arena right there where you don't have to get in your car. And I mean, that was the one thing that I did not enjoy about being a season ticket holder is getting in the car and driving, you know, into the city and fighting that traffic. Can you imagine if you could just be 5 or 10 minutes away, or living in the right there at the gathering and walking to the games? I mean, that would be utopia to me. You know?
It sounds pretty good for everyone, I'm sure. It's why the Battery has been so successful, of course. You know, when you were talking about your confidence level before, the 1 in 1,000, I just keep thinking about that and how it was so low. And now 2 years later, you do feel pretty confident that hockey will be back here to some capacity. Is that right?
I do. I do. I think, you know, again, you know, I watched the interviews at the All-Star game. I watched the interview of Gary Bettman and Bill Daly, the deputy commissioner and the commissioner. And you listen, and all the questions that were thrown to him, many questions that were thrown to him, were about expansion. And if so, where? And many people asked about Atlanta. Why Atlanta? And his answer was, he said, you know, Atlanta is a way different city today than it was even when the Thrashers left. So I took that as a very positive comment.
What's next for you? What's the next step?
Well, the next step is tomorrow night we're going to have a town hall meeting, if you will, up at Lanier Tech to answer any questions that the public might have, any concerns that they might have. Then we will await the vote next Tuesday night, which we are very hopeful will be a positive vote. And then I think we'll be perched and ready to go.